Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element Electrolytes, Delta G Ketones, ProBio Nutrition, and Training Peaks for supporting the podcast. I have links and promotions to these brands in the show notes, but you can also get them here. If you want to check out Element Electrolytes, head over to drinklmnt.com/HPO. That'll get you a free sample pack with your first purchase. At deltagketones.com, if you enter promo code BITTER20, you will get 20% off your next purchase. And if you go to probionutrition.com, enter promo code ENDURANCE, and that will get you 20% off your next purchase. If you're interested in getting deeper into your own training data, head over to trainingpeaks.com/HPO podcast. Nick, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Zach, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
No, absolutely. I love being in Austin for these type of situations. It allowed me to actually justify building a podcast studio. Enough cool people like yourselves tend to come through Austin to do the podcast routine and all that stuff.
And this is a killer studio. This is great.
Yeah, it was fun. Like when we moved from Phoenix to Austin, I guess almost 4 years ago at this point, and we were trying to figure out what we wanted, and we saw this spot, and we're like, it's just my wife and our dogs, so we actually like a smaller house because we just don't want to tolerate all the maintenance of something larger. But you don't want too small of a house, and then people come over and you're like, yeah, we don't have any room for you. And so we saw this where it was like the little studio up here was separate. We're like, oh, that'll be nice. And then after a couple of years, I was like, hey, Nicole, do you think I could build a podcast studio up there? And she's, yeah, just make sure you can take it down if we have company.
Right. So you put guests here too?
Yeah. So there's like a bedroom and a bathroom there too. And I've actually really kind of eased my way into this spot too, because now you can tell I've got an exercise bike over there. So it's sort of become mine, I guess, at this point, and I haven't upset Nicole too much about it.
Awesome. Well, great. Congratulations on the complexities of marriage and real estate and all of that.
Right. I probably owe her something at some point for that. So
these trade-offs are hard.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you here in Austin to chat about some running and your book and everything that you've got going on. So what are you training for right now?
I'm training for the New York City Marathon, and the race will be, the book comes out on Tuesday, October 28th, and the race is on Sunday, November 2nd or 3rd.
Awesome.
Right afterwards.
Yeah.
And then after that, I just turned 50, and I want to run a 100-miler. I think you might know a thing or two about this. You know, the age group record for 50 plus is gettable. It'd be a nice new experience to run 100. I was thinking I'd run Tunnel Hill 6 days later, but that's insane.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'll be out at Desert Solstice, which I think you're running.
Yeah. Desert Solstice is a great spot for it. Tunnel Hill is too, but yeah, that's a tight timeline, especially if you redline New York and really leave it out.
And I want to go hard at New York. You know, it's the age group world championships. My kids are going to be watching. Yeah. I've done, I don't think I've ever raced 6 days apart, but I've done hard workouts 6 days after a marathon, and it's doable if you do 95, 97% effort, but I want to go for it.
Yeah. It might just be nice too, not having that in the back of your mind, thinking like, sometimes I find, I'd be curious what your thoughts about this is just like, when I start putting too many races on the calendar, you sort of invite that voice to enter at some point. Well, there is that down the road if I don't have a good day here.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's true. At a certain degree, you have to not give yourself the excuse.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make your training. I had a very funny training cycle recently where I wanted to run. I ran the Twisted Branch 100K 2 weeks ago, but I also wanted to run a sub 5 minute mile on my birthday, which was like 3 weeks before the race. So I was doing a combination of ultra long runs and quarter mile repeats, which was like a funny combination. And, I did it. I succeeded. The best thing about that training cycle is that my middle son is a soccer player, but he also loves to run, and he's now equally fast at the mile. So we did all of our track workouts side by side. Like we'd alternate 400s with each other, which was just great.
Yeah. I remember when I first gave running any thought, it was my dad actually, he just asked me one day about some cross country meet that was like near a conference he was at. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And then I think I finished like third amongst like maybe 150 kids around my age. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'm actually decent at this. And then during the track season, this was like middle school, the protocol was he'd take me to the track and maybe 2 or 3 times a week and just do an all-out mile. And I remember like that he'd run it with me and we were pretty close. He'd be a little bit ahead of me. And then one day I beat him. I'm like, yes, finally I beat my dad.
That's great. It's a big milestone. You know, I'm playing chess with my 11-year-old and he like is getting so close to be able to beat me. And like, I know that the proper thing is to just play my hardest. And like, then it'll be so much more joy when he beats me as opposed to letting him beat me.
Yeah. And then you can be honest with them later on in life when did you let me beat you?
No, I didn't, right? Because there's no joy, right? Like when they're like 4, you have to let them, otherwise they have temper tantrums. But when they're 11, like they can handle it.
Yeah, they're ready to start absorbing some of those.
And the 15-year-old, he runs this 10-mile race with me each February. And first time is like 30 minutes behind. Now he's 10 minutes behind. He's going to catch me in that too. That'll be fun when he beats me in that. It'll be great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe we should jump into your running history a little bit too, because I think it is an interesting story where you kind of really started excelling a little bit later in life. But maybe what was your entry to running?
So there are 2 entry points. So the first was when I was 5 years old, and my dad was running the New York City Marathon, and I would run a little bit with him. It's right before my parents split and he moved away, but I would run a mile or 2 miles with him. And that was, I think that planted a seed of the sport in my brain. That's entry 1. But he moves away. We don't run that. I don't run that much. I don't think of myself as a runner. And then in high school, I get cut from the basketball team and I join the track team and suddenly I'm good, right? And well, not suddenly, but it takes a little while. I get pretty good. And so that's entry 2. Then I run through high school and freshman year in college and then not quite good enough. And so that's it for that. And then I start running again in my 20s, trying to break a 3-hour marathon. I eventually do that and then I get much better in my 40s. So those are the 3 kind of entry points to it.
Yeah. And by much better, you mean 50K age group record, averaging sub 6-minute mile pace?
Yeah. So I ran a bunch of marathons trying to break 3 hours in my 20s. I finally did. And then I ran a 2:43, which was wonderful when I was 30. And then I got thyroid cancer, got diagnosed right after the race. I came back 2 years later and then ran the exact same time. And in fact, for the next decade, every marathon I ran was exactly the same time. And so until I'm 43, I really did go 243, 243, 242, 242, 243, 245, like insanely similar times. Then in my 40s, I break through and I suddenly go, 238, that's nice. 234, that's nice. 229, that's quite a difference, right? In a year, I dropped from 243 to 229, and I set the American record in the 50K. And part of the book was inspired by this question of how did I get so much faster? Or even, how come I couldn't realize that I had this ability inside of me? And it kind of came to me one day. I was running, I remember the day vividly, I was running across the Brooklyn Bridge. I run to and from the office every day. And it hit me like a sudden realization, rare happens in life, and I had to sit down. But I realized that I had run all those 243s because at some deep psychological level, all I had cared about was being as fast as I'd been before I got sick. And so it was like all I cared was being Nick before he went through this hard stuff. And because of that, I didn't allow myself to press on these limits. And so I had to have sort of an external coaches really push me through the mental game of getting from that block at 243, which was there for a very good reason, right? And get me down to the 229. So it's a little bit of my running history. And that's part of what inspired the book, which is this recognition that what makes you fast, what makes you slow, what sets your limits can be buried deep inside. So it's a story of my life, my father's life, and then other runners who I've competed with or encountered along the way who use running as a way to teach you about hard things in life.
Did you start working with a coach when you made that jump too?
Yeah, so I had been approached by Nike and these 3 coaches, Steve Finley, Brett Kirby, Joe Holder, and Nike had this thing where they, were approaching sort of everyday athletes and approached me. Obviously, they approached me because I was the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine, right? So I'm like an everyday athlete, but, it wasn't totally random. So it was really Steve Finley who figured out my psychology. Not directly, he didn't figure out the cancer issue, but he figured out, while talking to me and while understanding my past in running and what I'd run in high school, he knew in the back of his head I could be a lot faster. And he knew I hadn't put in the mileage and the pounding in my 20s that would make going faster in my 40s impossible. But he also very smartly realized that running had never been and never would be the most important thing in my life. I had this other career. I've got these 3 children. I've got a lot of things that I'm focused on. And so he figured out a way to get the most out of me with the time available.
That's interesting. I find that one of the more interesting parts of coaching is it almost doesn't matter if there is a perfect training program on the table. And then sometimes I think we get paralyzed by that because the most visible, like, runners are going to be like Olympians in a lot of cases. And oh, look at that 130-mile training week with 2 quality sessions and a long run with goal marathon pace. It's like, it gets a little like, okay, how do I fit that in? Or maybe I shouldn't do it, or I lower my expectations because I can't do that. Whereas when you start looking at it through the lens of, here are the non-negotiables within your lifestyle. So what is available? What's the best plan forward with that? And then I think when you start dialing those things in, you get consistency within that framework, and then you can start seeing some of those.
You got to understand the runner. You got to understand their goals. You got to understand their time. You got to understand their travel. You got to understand all those things. That's what Steve Finley did, and helped take me to a totally different level.
What got you interested in ultra running originally?
Do you count a 50K as ultra running?
Yeah.
Okay. So I ran that 229. I had this incredible linear progression, and I run the 229 in Chicago in 2019. And then COVID hits, right? And so I trained really hard, got a lot faster, but I never got to test it because all the marathons were shut down. And so ultra running is, sort of popped up that it was in the December of 2020. So we've been in COVID for a year. I haven't run a major marathon. I ran the one like dorky marathon by myself on the Loop in Prospect Park. And Josh Cox, who's an agent to Des Linden, who I know a little bit, was like, hey, you want to pace Des in her 50K world record attempt?
Yeah.
I was like, sure, why not? That sounds hilarious, right? And then I realized that the men's age group record was like the same as the women's world record. I didn't end up pacing her because she got super fast.
Yeah.
And it was like clear her goal, the women's record was like 3:07, but then she changed her goal to sub 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, Josh, can I still run the race and try to set my age group record, which was like 3:06? And he said, sure, no problem. So that was the beginning. But the more interesting transition was when I decided to start doing 50 milers. And after that race, I went back to marathoning and I was stalled out. I was running like 235s, 237s, which is fine and great and cool. It's like you're 45 years old and you're running 235. That's great. But I wanted something new. You need to set new goals, right?
Absolutely.
And try new things. In marathon was always great because I could either try to run faster or try to run the same speed while aging. And then I was like, I need something different. And so I was like, I'll run a 50 mile and I'll try to set the American record for men in my age group in the 50 mile. And so I went out to Tunnel Hill, tried, and failed spectacularly.
Yeah. The Tunnel Hill is an interesting course because it's fast, weather's oftentimes ideal. But if you don't pace it perfectly, it can end a little rougher than you'd like to. You come down that hill at the end. So if you pace it right, in theory, you think, actually, like negative split on the finish line. But if you can kind of always tell on that last trip up the hill how rough that turnaround is going to be, and then you kind of know, did I play my cards right or not? And
I've run it now 3 times. Each time has gotten much better. But the first time I ran it was 2022, and I've planned it all out. I've got my splits. I've got to run 6:41s to set the record. I've figured out how to take my gel exactly at the aid station. All the things you think through. And then I get up and I'm ready out. Weather's gonna be great. I'm wearing my Vaporflies, and there's a couple inches of snow. Right? Totally unexpected. Right. And so what I should have done, I should have said, Nick, like you're wise, you've aged. Like, why don't you put on some trail shoes and just run a good race, right? And instead I go out there in my fast shoes, try to run those splits, and of course, and I do something to my Achilles and drop out at mile 37, right? And I just remember crying in the tent, at mile 37, my Achilles hurts. I think it was at mile 31 or something. I was on pace, but I could kind of tell that I wasn't going to get it.
Yeah.
And I have a frozen gel, and I try to take off my glove, and I slip, and I fall, and I get up, and I've been running with this guy now. He's off in the distance, and then something tweaked in my ankle or my Achilles. just this everything fell apart, and the next 6 miles are just trash. But I sometimes think back to that moment when I dropped out. I have a chapter in the book, and I call it, a Labrador in a race for wolves, right? I didn't have to drop out. Like, I did do something to my Achilles, right? But I stayed in that tent for 15 minutes. And at the end of those 15 minutes, I was still in third place, right? I went home. I finished the race, or I didn't finish the race. I drop out. I make my way back to the airport. I fly home. I get home, go to bed, get up the next morning, go for a walk with my kids, and I look online. And people are still running the damn race, right? Like, I could have just finished the race, but I didn't have the right mentality. I had this mentality of splits and goals and 641s, not 642s. And so then, the next year I came back and again went for the American record. So this is Tunnel 2023, did much better, but, bombed out at mile 41, but finished, did all right. Obviously didn't get it. And then last year I went and I was like, I'm not even going to try for the record. I'm just going to go and I'm just going to do the best I can. And I ended up having by far my best race, only missed the record by a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes. I just had a great race and a great experience. And so that's how I got into ultra running.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
It's always fun to hear how people kind of get into it. And I think it's changed now too. I know when I first started getting into ultra running, it was kind of felt, all right, we're kind of these outsiders looking in on the running community, and maybe I can talk a marathoner into trying a 100-miler or something like that. And it always felt like the first thought was either like, I don't have any interest in that, or I couldn't do it. And I mean, we're talking like 3-hour marathoners, like you can do a 100-miler when you realize what it actually entails within it. And, but there's a psychological block, I think, between the interest and then just the extrapolation of, what can you actually do? And now I think it's gotten popular enough and just exposed to enough different communities outside of just kind of what you'd expect would feed into it, like your road runners. And, I'll have people reaching out to me and be like, I've never been a runner before, but I kind of want to do this 100-mile race or this ultra marathon. And I'm just like, wow, that's a total reversal of who I would have expected to be reaching out to me like 10 years ago when I kind of was first really getting into the sport.
It's an interesting societal phenomenon too, where it's as a world and as a country, we're focusing on shorter and shorter stuff like TikToks, right? And then in this sport, we're going longer, we're going deeper. And I think those two things aren't unrelated. And I think there's I think people have a pull. Like we're all pulled into our phones. We're all pulled into instant gratification. We're all pulled into these things, and we want to go the other way too. And so that's, I think, what's happening as well.
Yeah, it's almost like a cleanse from the short form stuff that you get so often nowadays.
Yeah, and also I think that we get so locked into like urban life, screens, pressure, and for me, running has always been a way to escape. Right? I've got this hard job. I work at my desk all day. And running's a break, but like ultra running's not just a break from my hard job. Ultra running's a break from like the world, right? And it's a way to get out and be closer to your ancestors and feel what it was like to be on a hunt, right? Or to be just a totally different person than the guy in a suit in the office typing at the keyboard. That's the other thing. So now, the last race I ran was the Twisted Branch 100K, which is like more different from Tunnel Hill than Tunnel is from a marathon, right? Like the Twisted Branch 100K, you're just like going up mountains for weirdly 67 miles.
Right. Yeah.
It's like kind of unfair, right? Because it's 100K, so you think it's 62 miles. Right. So when you're at like the aid station at mile 56, you're like 6 miles to go. And they're like, no, you have 11 miles to go. And you're like, I have how many miles to go? Yeah. But you're out in the woods and you're in like a totally different headspace. It took me 13 hours to run the race, which is a lot of hours, but it's a wonderful spiritual experience, right? And so when I was running Twisted Branch 2 weeks ago, I've run it the last 2 years, I ran it totally different from marathon. Like I didn't look at my watt. I wasn't looking at my splits. I just tried to imagine that I was a kid running in the woods. I just tried to like enjoy the mountains, right? Enjoy where you are and look at how beautiful it is and enjoy the trees and the sounds and run, which is very different from, all right, my heart rate has to be between 135 and 137. Let me check my core temperature and my pace and how, right? So,
yeah. It is funny because the sport, the way it's grown and where it's professionalized has had, I think there's, I wouldn't say a fracturing, but there's definitely a conversation starting, if it hadn't already, within kind of the trail side of the sport, where the experience you described is what I think of as the initial draw for a lot of the ultra running community. But since the sport has gotten to a point now where we've got athletes where that's all they do, and it's almost always in that side of the sport, have the optimization side kind of creeping in onto the, I just want to go and now look at my splits and figure out
Oh
what,
yeah, right. There's got to be real tension.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And you look at Western states, right, and there's like
Exactly.
all this like gear, right, and they've
Yep.
got like the incredible cooling systems and the hats, and
Yeah.
that's it. So there's a real tension there.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that people have always really liked about the trail ultra world is you kind of felt like, regardless if you were, I'll go back in time a little bit to reference it, right? Whether you were like Tim Olson or Rob Card winning Western States, or Gunhild Swenson finishing with like seconds left on the clock before the cutoff.
Yeah.
Those people and everyone in between felt like they did the same thing. They felt like their experiences mapped. One was maybe longer from a time standpoint, but they all had their highs and lows. They all had to navigate aid stations. They all had to like work with a reasonably small crew in most cases, or no crew in some cases. But there wasn't like this huge kind of logistical map. Whereas now it's, yeah, you could have a crew of half a dozen people times 2 to hit every aid station at Western States, optimal cooling, better support from like just gear and whatnot.
Yeah.
So now I think it feels like you can look at, oh, this person ran Western States and I ran Western States, but we did 2 very different events.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably something that like there's where the tensions may be at.
Yeah, but you know what? The guy who like resents the folks with the cooling vest running Western States, there's another race for him.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Go
that's
run
just it.
some like 6-day race in Saskatchewan or whatever.
Right. Yeah. It's just funny to me because you'd think the optimization stuff would be focused on the more controlled events and
Yeah.
less so on the trails. But then again, it's always money driven at the end of the day with that stuff. So it's going to find where the value is there. So the trails, UTMB and Western States is where it's at.
Totally. Yep. No, and definitely the shoe companies, the gear companies, and a lot of that's good, right? It can help keep people safer, right? It can like do a lot of good stuff out there, but I
Yeah.
can also see how the purists are thinking, wait, now, what is that you're wearing?
Right. Yeah. Super foam. What?
Yeah. There's like a steel plate in your shoe on the trails. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fun time to be an ultra runner, I think, as the sport kind of grows and
Yeah.
you navigate these uncertainties.
I'm so glad I was introduced. I mean, I wish I'd been introduced in my 20s.
Just a quick reminder, Training Peaks is one of the best tools for monitoring your training progress and my go-to tool when coaching individuals. At Training Peaks, you can get deep into the data, assess training load, recovery, and easily monitor progress across all training intensities. It is a perfect example of a program that takes much of the guesswork out of your training and coaching experience. I really love assessing intervals on Training Peaks. One of the first things I'll do when I get back from a run is I'll hop onto Training Peaks, unpack all that data, and just see how each of those individual intervals went and really dive into where I could maybe improve in the future. So if you're interested in getting deeper into your own training data, head over to trainingpeaks.com/HPO podcast.
In some ways you asked how I got introduced to it. I actually maybe got introduced to it through what's this race called the Escarpment Run, which is, it's 18 miles in the Catskills, but it takes you longer than a marathon, right? So kind of that was when I was introduced to, I remember the bus out to the first time, and there's a guy who's, you haven't really run, son, until you've seen the sun come up twice on the same run. And I was like, okay. Haven't done that, to be honest.
Right.
And I remember my wife at the finish line one year. I ran it for, 10 years, 8 years. And at the finish line, she's like, people who beat you in this race, they look a lot more normal than the people who beat you in other races, right? It's like strong people, right? It's like people who are like full body fitness, not like, rail thin marathoners. It's a whole different kind of person. And then there's like the kind of the mountain man mystique. And it was after the Escarpment Run that I created, I tell these bedtime stories to my children. It's like this universe that's now existed for 15 years. But I created these creatures called flambas, which are like the good guys helping protect. The hero of the story is this guy who's like born in an egg and raised by chickadees and has one parent as a wizard. But his protectors are partly these half human, half antelope creatures that are based on like mountain runners. Okay. Kind of like Rob Craw, right?
Yeah.
With like the, like long hair, like the purists, like the mountain running purists. They're like some of the heroes in my bedtime stories.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
Anyway, so it's the Escarpment Run that kind of set the foundation for the later mountain running and the later ultras.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too, just like kind of the growth inside this sport too, because I think about like my progression into it, where I did my first ultra marathon and it was on a trail race. And I had no clue there were even like road or track or timed events existed at the time. So it's just, you kind of think, oh, that was a cool experience. And then you hear something or someone tells you something, well, maybe I'll try that. And it just over the years, you kind of figure out, where do you want to try to focus your time and energy? Or back to what you were saying too, like I think one of the cool things about ultra running is if something gets stale, you can go a totally different direction inside the sport.
Yeah.
And if it's a mental, psychological reset you need, not like my body's breaking down and I need to actually just rest it, then you can just sort of reset without having to feel like you need to step away from the sport. Yeah, I always find like the pro marathoners, I think Sarah Hall is probably the best example of this, where it seems like she has been able to just go year after year into her 40s and not lose any bit of that. I really want to do this training block again, and I really want this race badly, where, yeah, I mean, I think you'd be a break in there somewhere, wouldn't you? Like,
look at her husband.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of a remarkable pairing, right? He's the greatest American marathoner of his generation. And then, basically goes from a string bean to a mashed potato. And he decides he's going to set what was it? His goal was like the first guy to run a sub 5 minute mile and bench press 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Like Ryan is incredible. I admired him. I love his running style. I love the way he did it, but totally different from Sarah, who's just, I'm going to keep at it, keep doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never heard him talk about it, but it almost seemed just like an outsider following. It just was like kind of overnight. He was like, yep, I'm done with that. And I'm stop running.
I think he was having, it was like testosterone.
He had some health issues, I think, that he didn't find it sustainable.
And there were it was like a year where he was like running like 2:18s or something. It just wasn't working. Who knows?
And he's like, there's not a path forward here for me, or I don't want to find it.
I want
to do something
different.
Else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting that they kind of, because she really took off after that a little bit too. I mean, she was always good, but it seemed like she had a whole nother wave of
and that
PRs.
Was 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. She's amazing. I mean, he's amazing too. Like, what a couple. But yes, that's kind of wild.
Yeah. I wonder about that with the super shoe foam too, where if you do hit like a stalling point where like it's really hard to get faster and you're really drawn by that kind of progression, and now all of a sudden, because her career would line up really nicely with that, where she probably would be getting to where right when super shoes came out, she was probably getting to that point where people would expect, all right, she's probably not going to get better, probably gradually digress. And now all of a sudden we have this mechanical like change in how we race, and she can PR again. Potentially she could have without him, but I would imagine that was maybe a component that maybe helped at least a little bit.
Yeah, it helps psychologically. Like one of the hardest things as a aging runner is just getting the coolest thing about running. One of the reasons I love the sport so much is that your successes are your own and your failures are your own, right? Like you get worse at soccer, it's harder to tell you're worse at soccer because you have a whole team, right? Even in tennis, where it's just you lose earlier in the tournament, well, your opponent might have been better. But running, it's you, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can really feel the effects of aging. And so a lot of people leave the sport as they start to decline. And so shoes did, for people in their like late 30s, stave that off, right? Because you could not decline by putting on these great shoes.
Yeah. And I know you ran with Brady Homer this morning. I think he's been on the podcast, I think 4 or 5 times.
His shoe reviews are great on this podcast.
Oh,
like when you guys talk about it, it's that's incredible. Like I know a lot about shoes, but listen to you guys talk for 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's always fun to chat.
Yeah.
We're due for another one. I think we've got a fresh set to go over. But I think that because he had some injury. I mean, he's not old either. He just had some injuries that really, I think, plagued him after college, to the degree where he was mostly biking for a while, and then kind of came up with a new training approach that worked well for him. And then I think also the foams helped him. Now he's getting to a point where he's putting in quite a bit of miles. I remember his first marathon was like, I ran 4 days per week and then biked like 10 hours or something like that.
Yeah. Now he's up to 5 days a week.
Right. Yeah.
Right, like
he's got all these like moderate long runs though. They're like,
what do you think the
miles.
world record is for like someone who's only run 5 days a week? Right?
Yeah,
it's probably 215, right?
Yeah, there's got to be somebody who's
6 days a week. There's like a lot of religious people. That's probably like 206, right, or 205, right? But 5 days. What is the record for someone who runs 3 days?
3 days a week, yeah. And how do you weigh it? Because do you have to be on that program for a certain amount of time before you have to stop leaning on your prior training and things like that? Or?
If people could please answer this in the comments of Zach Bitter's.
Yeah. Let us know. But yeah, that would be interesting. Because I remember thinking about that when he ran 226 on 4 days. I was like, I wonder what I think I asked him on the podcast, I wonder what the least amount of running days were across like the board and where the times all landed and where you fit within that. Cause I would imagine he was up in the front.
I used to have a kind of a funny goal. I'd be like, it's hard. You can't know the answers. So I was like, I think nobody ahead of me trained less than me. Mm-hmm. Right. It was back when I was running like 243s, but I was running on like 50 miles a week, and you've got a hard job, and there's not that much time to run. And most of the guys who are ahead of you are running like 70, 80, or 120, right? But I do think I do really respect people who figure out how to, with the time, they have limited time available, either because they have injury risk or because they have jobs, kids, life, travel, whatever it is. I really respect people who like figure out like, this is what I got, this is what I'm going to do at that time, and do the best I can.
And then trust it.
Yeah.
Not get distracted by what everyone else is doing.
And I like that I asked Brady while we were running this morning, I said, so what are you going to change? Now you've run this incredible 224, and the OTQ is not that far off. Right. But he wasn't like, I'm going to run like 7 days a week and 120 miles, and I'm going to add in cross training, and I'm going to do this. He said, maybe change this variable and that variable.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got the scientist mind too. So the physiology, exercise phys stuff. So I think he probably looks at it in a pretty fine-tooth way with respect to what do I want to change so I can still see the signal there without just throwing so much in there that I have no clue what worked and what didn't work.
I have a rule that I only do one new thing a week, right?
Okay.
I won't, if I do barefoot running, it's the first time of the cycle, I won't like add an extra tempo run, or I won't do a harder, VO2 max run, right? If I do my longest long run, I'm not going to add anything else. So you're adding, because I feel like once I add two things, that's when I start to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I increase if I add something, let's say I add a hard VO2 max run, or I like add an intensity level to a tempo run, I keep my mileage exactly the same. So when I was training for Twisted Branch, my Strava log is, my mileage is 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, right? Just like I'm going to keep that variable, right? Like rock solid, and then I'll change other things as I go, but the mileage I won't change. And then if I change the mileage, I'll keep the other stuff the same.
Sure. Yeah. Just a quick reminder that Probio Nutrition is my go-to supplement for all my micronutrients and digestive needs. The reason I like it is it was developed by my good friend, Dr. Mark Bubbs. He has had a lot of experience working with successful individuals that have busy, active lifestyles, including Olympians, NBA basketball players, professional hockey players. One of the things he noticed was a lot of supplements were not only mislabeled, but not very effective. So he went about to try to lower the friction point there by making it as easy as having one scoop of Probio Nutrition every day. I will take it with either water, smoothie, or mix it in with my yogurt once per day, and then I'm done. And I can rest at ease knowing that along with a good diet, I'll have all those micronutrients and digestive needs met. Head over to probionutrition.com and enter promo code ENDURANCE for 20% off your next order. You can tease that out. Did you find anything that stood out to you as to what levers were more impactful for your fitness?
So when I think about the period of my life where I made the real jump, where I made the 243 to 229, like the levers that I worked on were, I increased the mileage, made a big difference, right? I went from 50 to 70 to 80. And then I added like short stuff, right? Like half miles, right? Which I wasn't doing at all. Cause I was like, what does that have to do with the marathon?
Right. Yeah.
But I think it was partly a psychological ploy by my coach, Steve Finley, to get me comfortable running at 450 pace. Because then when I'm running the marathon at 550 pace, it won't look so weird on the watch, right? Once you've seen the 4, then you can handle the 5 without stressing your mind. I really believe that pain is not purely physiological. It's mostly just a signal from your brain, right? Your brain runs this thermostat, right? And it's like looking at the temperature. It's looking at all your training. It knows everything about you. And it's, can you complete this race at this pace while maintaining homeostasis? And if it fears you can't, then it starts sending signals to your body, right? Yep. And one of the things you can do, it's such a hard thing because you have to trick your brain, but you have to use your brain to trick your brain, right? One of the things you can do is just get less scared by the indicators. And so the way I deal with that in my training, I have one thing I do that I think is actually somewhat innovative, which is in every training cycle, I try to stress every system of the body at least once more than will be stressed on marathon day. So I will run 20 miles while dehydrated because that will get me past the point of dehydration that'll be in a 26-mile marathon. Or I will run down a mountain in bad shoes, because that will put more stress on my quads than the marathon will. I have gone running slightly hungover on the theory that helps you with kind of the like confusion you have at the end of the marathon, right? And so the goal, and I'll obviously run lots of miles faster than marathon pace, and I'll run like when I haven't eaten for 12 hours, or like I'll run right after a big lunch, right? Just to like always be stressing different parts of the system so that when you're in the race, you're in the ultra, your brain isn't as afraid of that moment.
It's not new on race day. Yeah.
And like part of what I did in this period where I did so well, 2018, 2019, was my theory of running while slightly hungover, like that would kind of come later and be adapted onto this. But it was part of what Steve was doing was just getting me not to be afraid of 550 pace. Like, how do you make someone not afraid of 550 pace, right? Because I'd run 10 years of 6:15 marathon pace for marathons, and he wanted me to get down. And well, one of the ways you do it is you have him go as far as you can at 450 pace.
Yeah.
It was like a really smart insight.
Yeah, I love this topic because you'll get the people who are like all into optimization, where they're like, oh, why would you put yourself in a situation to lower quality of a training session? And they look at these things as negatives to do. And I always think with that is, well, that's just a timeline thing.
Yeah.
It's if you're like, you have a lot more tools on the table available to you with a good timeline. So if the question is, what did I take off the table by doing a dehydrated long run? Well, if you extend the timeline long enough, you don't really have to make that compromise.
Right.
So I think it's just a question when you're talking to someone before they're getting in is like, where are we between now and the race, and what are the components that are going to lead to the best possible solution for you? And if you have a good timeline and you're going to get that psychological benefit of kind of like poking those systems like that, then yeah, get yourself really fit and play around with that stuff a little bit, because you got the extra.
Well, here's another advantage. If you take my philosophy, it makes it a lot easier to train because you don't have to wait for the perfect time, right?
Yeah, it just happens eventually.
It happens eventually. Like a lot of this was, I didn't do this on purpose, right? Like I don't do dehydrated long runs because I plan them. I just do them because it's like really hard to find time to run when you're running. Like yesterday, I had to do something in Los Angeles in the morning, came into Austin, I had to do something in the afternoon. So there was like one window to run, which was like when it was 102 degrees.
Yeah.
Right. And so I did it. Right. And I got whatever benefits you get, which better be good because it sure wasn't fun.
Right. Yeah.
But if you just kind of commit to running whenever works best in your life, you will end up, and as opposed to like trying to figure out the optimal time when you've had the optimal nutrition and you can really do the run exactly right. I think there's real benefits to efficiency into life.
Yeah.
And I run, like most of my life most of my miles are this incredible life hack where I run to work from my home in Brooklyn to my office in Manhattan. It's 4 or 5 miles in, 4 or 5 miles back. I'm running with a little pack, sometimes with a backpack, which is actually good training for ultras, right? It's made me used to like running with this stuff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to go up and down the bridge. So it's actually getting some good like hill training, right? There's actually like kind of agility training because you're like jumping out as like the folks on Canal Street are like throwing these boxes of whatever, like sardines out on the street, right? Like, there's some good stuff you get from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I also think like from the mental side of ultra running too, where you're preparing yourself physically with these workouts, but to the degree that you can prepare your mind to be on for that long, you almost need a non-running input to really do that. Like I think about this with what am I doing with my time outside of training? And I don't know that I would be a better runner if I was just training 100% professionally, where it's like all I really have to accomplish today is this run, this rehab session, this strength session, and then just kind of lounge around and make sure I'm ready for the next one. Right. Like physiologically, that sounds great, right? Sounds, hey, yeah, I mean, you're probably going to get a little more training in, you're going to recover a little quicker and all that stuff. But if I don't feel like my mind has ever been turned on from when I wake up to when I go to bed, I'm going to struggle in that 100-mile race because I'm going to have my mind on that entire time, or it's just going to go sideways at some point.
I completely agree. And I think that, sometimes people ask, they're like, well, you're CEO of the Atlantic. Don't you have stuff to do?
Right.
Like,
yeah. How are you running all these races? Where's the time?
Right. What's wrong with you? Right. Go back to your job. Go sell some ads. And my answer is, I actually think it makes me better at my job. Right. Having this like focused training helps me be focused at my job and helps me like learn how to handle intense meetings. Right. There's mental work you do while you run, and like you're thinking through hard things at work. But there's also like the mental benefits from a hard job can help with hard running, and hard running can help with a hard job.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think, it comes down to like, how efficient are you with the time you're using at these different things? And I think running is a big productivity increaser. So
Totally.
it's like you take maybe a step back on your total available time to work, but then the time you're working is just that much better.
Yeah, and you figure out how to make it as efficient as possible. So when I'm, just running into work, like I'm occasionally doing phone calls, right? Like often listening to podcasts, like very often listening to audiobooks, right? Stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
It's not that much longer to run into work than it is to take the subway. There are definitely disadvantages. Like the staff kind of thinks I'm weird. I show up in my shorts. Maybe it like dilutes some of the illusion that you're supposed to have when you're the CEO, right? Like sometimes you forget your socks, right? And so you're wearing like a dark suit with like tube socks, right? Or like things go wrong, right? But mostly it's a great life hack.
Yeah. Speaking of that, when I was still teaching, I was already into ultra running. So I'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning, go for a run. I mean, I had it down to, I'd get back from that run and I was out the door in like less than 10 minutes some days. I'd take a shower, grab some food, hit the road.
Yep.
And one day I walk in, I'd actually been in the building for probably an hour and a half at that point. I'm in like the first class of the students, and one of the students is like, "Mr. Bitter, do you realize you have two different shoes on?" I look down, I'm like, "Oh, no way."
It's like part of the trade-off, right? And if you spend like 20 minutes getting dressed and you look in the mirror,
right.
But I spent most of my professional life, right? Like I'm often wearing like wrinkled clothes.
Yeah.
And like I get dressed behind a plant. There's all kinds of trade-offs you make, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's definitely been worth it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the other thing I found too is like when I was first running, ultra running and stuff like that, when I was teaching, that there was that built-in structure of the job, and you almost lose track of how much that actually helps you optimize in the running and things like that. So like when I started working 100% for myself, it was like, all right, I need to have those there. I need to place them there and figure out ways to both have something I feel like I need to do versus I can do.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of a thing where, I'd have like my training, I'd have like podcast recording and editing and coaching and things like that. And some of it was like on a specific point, but a lot of it was like, well, if I want to do this first, I can do this first. If I want to do that first, I got to always shuffle things around based on just what I preferred. And then I started realizing you can't do too much of that because then it gets comfortable almost, where you almost feel like you have too many options. Where on, if I'm out there at mile 70 on a track and my time starts slipping by a second or two per lap, like my only option is to speed up.
Right.
I don't have a choice to relax for a little bit if I want to meet the goal. So I think you do need some of that.
Yeah, that's good mental training, right? So you kind of adjust your to-do list based on a way, not just the thing that, it so happens that the thing that is most efficient for getting your time, getting everything done, also helps train your mind for the ultras.
Yeah,
right. Like
absolutely.
Being hyper-disciplined, doing the hardest thing first, staying locked in, trains that discipline, which then translates over.
Yeah, and the other thing I think too is like the other I find with the training too, I can really move around workouts, which to some degree is good because I do want to be able to do them on the days they're going to get the highest quality. But I also find it valuable to sometimes not have that option. So one thing I'll do is like this last training block, I started running with a group here in Austin, rogue running, 3 days per week because that made me go there and do what they're doing for 3 days a week, which they're always doing something that's important for me. But then that makes me say, okay, with these other 4 days, those are the days I have to optimize for what I'm training for. They have to fit in those 4 days. And that gives me a little bit less of that like sort of out to maybe say, like, I don't really feel like doing that workout today. I can do it tomorrow. And then kind of sending that signal to your brain that you have that out always, where I think that's just like a DNF enabler. When you,
it's interesting. It's whether you give yourselves outs is a really interesting psychological, like when you do Navy SEAL training, right? They put the bell like right there, right? Like they make it very easy to stop. And so you're in like the hardest, most intense pain of your life and you have an easy out, right? And that's the test. Yeah. Right. And so it's, can you avoid the easy out? And like when you give yourself the option of having an out and when you don't give yourself the option, let's imagine a 100-miler. And, if like at every mile there's an aid station and a car, like how much harder is it to do than if it's like aid stations are like 15 miles apart and there are no cars. Yeah. It's a different experience. It's a different experience. And there are advantages to both and there are reasons why you do both. There's psychological moments where you do both, but it is very different. Yeah.
Just a quick reminder that Delta G ketones is my go-to exogenous ketone source. I will take these after my big training sessions as well as during my long runs at lower intensity and longer races at lower intensity. You can get 20% off your next purchase by going to deltagketones.com and entering promo code BITTER20. Yeah, I wonder if we'll see growth in the more extreme side where there are some events like this where there are no aid stations. There's like spots where you can find water, I guess, but you kind of have to carry your own food.
Yep.
And that just adds a whole nother element of imperfection. And I just think there's a big enough group of people who are looking for that. They're looking for that. I want the more remote, the less logistically dependent scenario.
And you can't like load the race map onto your Garmin.
Right.
You've got to figure it out.
Yeah, Barclay style where you get a paper map and
No, and there's a total advantage. I mean, and again, back to one of the things I said earlier, like part of the reason I love mountain running is the sense that you're getting back to this like prehistoric sense. And yeah, maybe you should do it without aid stations and Garmin's, and you just eat berries off the bushes as you go.
Yeah. Well, and even with the fueling too, I always think about that too. It's, like when I was doing low carb stuff, I was like, you know what, if there were events where you had to carry your own food, now we have a level of the equation to consider where it's like you don't have access to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So how do you change your diet and your nutritional approach when you don't have access to that all the time versus when you do? But then, it's a totally different sport almost.
Right. It's funny. When I ran Twisted Branch, I did half and half. So the first half of the race, I had nutrition that I brought. I was taking ketones on a regular cadence. I had like my Morton gels, and then I was like, okay, no more. I'm just going to eat what's at the aid station, and I'm not going to look at my watch, right? Mm-hmm. And it was actually useful to have looked at my watch in the first half to keep myself slow. Like, and every time my heart rate would creep up above 150, and I would like slow down because I knew it was going to get very hot during the day. And then the second half, I'm just basically running by feel. I'm eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and watermelon, whatever they happen to have there. And it was a very different experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of fun. It's kind of like we were talking about before too. It's cool to have there's variants and options because you can get fatigued with I need to take a gel every X minutes and I need to have this much fluid.
And sometimes it feels wrong, right? It feels like you shouldn't do it. You should you're out there for spiritual reasons. Maybe you should release.
Yeah. I was just listening to an interview with Anton Krapitka. He was out at, I think it was at UTMB. And they were kind of asking him about that. And I mean, he's a thoughtful guy and a smart guy. So you'd think, oh yeah, maybe he would be interested in all this new research we have around like how much electrolytes do you need per liter of sweat loss and in carbohydrate and all that stuff. And he's, I don't know. I kind of just wish it wasn't like that. Like it's just kind of like you go out there and you eat when you can and you drink when you need to and you see who survives.
There's a certain logic to that, but it's also I love what we're learning physiologically, and there are things you learn physiologically. There are things I've learned physiologically from studying the science of racing that are cool for the rest of my life, and I've been teaching my kids about like heat adaptation, and saunas, for their soccer training, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we need both. So the sport just needs to get a little bit bigger, so we have like enough opportunities in both sides of that.
Well, I live in New York, so my favorite ultra run. Have you ever followed the Sri Chinmoy 3100? It's so cool. I was there last week. The race starts in August and ends in October, so you have plenty of time to watch it if you miss it.
Yeah.
But it's 3,100 miles around the same block, right? And it's like part of the reason Sri Chinmoy set it up that way. It's for logistics, right? If you have people run across the country, it's hard to keep track of them. But it's also partly like you want them to reach spiritual transcendence. Like the whole point of the race is to reach a higher level of mental plane. And maybe if you're like running in the Rockies and you're like looking at the beautiful lakes, right? You're not going to get it if you're running on the Grand Central Parkway over and over and over again.
It's kind of like the marathon monks almost.
It's a little bit like the marathon monks, yeah. It's wild to watch it. I took one of my kids last week. All three of my boys have gone and seen it at least a little bit. We've run a little bit with them. It's a really magical experience.
Yeah. I like the way they structure that one too, where they have an allotted time per day you can be out there.
Yeah.
I think that adds a really interesting variable too, because you don't have, I like the gamesmanship of you have this amount of time, do with it what you want. But I also like the part where you kind of have that structure of, okay, everyone's got to stop here. And then there's going to be like a reset, and then we kind of take on another day.
I don't know whether they might have done that for the people counting the laps, right? Like everybody. So the race ends at midnight and starts at 6, right? Mm-hmm. And you can leave before midnight if you want, right? You have to run like basically 60 miles a day, or be on track to run 60 miles a day. And if you want to bank some, and if you don't, you can get kicked out of the race if you're not on that pace. And so some people will wrap up and go home at 11. Right? Most people run until midnight and come back at 6. You're not getting a ton of sleep. But it means that the volunteers, they don't have to have a volunteer out in this Jamaica Queens at 2 a.m.
Yeah, when you have a race that long, you have to worry about that. Like just
Yeah, and
how
all
everything-
kinds of crazy stuff happens, right? It's a block in a like tough part of Queens, right? And then
Yeah.
they're running around a school and a playground, and all kinds of weird stuff's happening everywhere, and it's a very difficult place to run a race, which is kind of the point. The other thing I like about it is you don't actually know who's running the race, right? Because you go and like you see are they just a jogger, or are they like if they run 2,000 miles, or if this like mile 2, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't. It's at this blur, and then there are all these kids who go to the school. So sometimes you're there, and they're like all these kids like just storming the street and running around. And you're like, don't you know the world's longest ultra run is going on here, and that guy's leading it, right?
These kids don't care.
They don't care, right? They're just like going to school, and these guys and girls are running around it for 62 days.
Yeah. That's an interesting event too. Have you ever considered doing something? I mean, schedule wise, that's probably off the table in the short term anyway.
It's hard to keep up with the news when you do that.
Right. Yeah.
I was running with one guy, and it was 2 years ago, and I was like mid-October, and he's like, well, what's going on? Well, I was like, well, Hamas invaded Israel and started a war, and he's like, whoa, really? I was like, yeah, that happened 2 weeks ago. He's like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, well, that's going on, and there have been real breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. Oh, no way, right?
Yeah.
My job will be very hard to manage my job if I were doing that, and my children and my life. I would love to really test myself in some way, but it'll have to be after my youngest kid goes to college. I would love to run the Appalachian Trail or run across America. I would love to run across America. I love this country. I'd love to see it. I'd love to experience it that way. That's Nick's bucket list and dream. If I could do it in a way that's safe and you're not going to get hit by a truck. But when my youngest guy is 18, then maybe I'll look at it.
Yeah. I was scheduled to do that in 2021, I think. And then I got injured really close to when we were supposed to start. And it was
really? You're going to run across the country?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And then that's been 4 years ago. So I'll get people reach out to me and ask, hey, you still going to do that? And I'm like, I'd like to, but it's really just one of those things where if you want to do it as fast as possible, there's maybe a block of time kind of in the late summer, early fall that works well, where you're going to get through the Sierras before the snow comes, and you're not going to hit the Midwest in this humid summer and all that stuff. So then it's just, how do you fit that into any sort of life that has other things going on?
It's hard.
It's tough. Yeah.
When did Michael Wardian did it March, April, May? Is that right?
Yeah, he did it he didn't do it at what I would consider the best time of year to do it.
Yeah.
When I was scheduled to do it, I was starting to kind of do my homework, and I was interviewing a bunch of people who had done it or talking to a bunch of people who had done it. And Pete Kostelnick is, he's got the record. So I was interested to see what his thought was. And he said, you really want to leave early September. Huh. Because then you're most likely.
And you always do it west to east, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where the way the wind blows, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think that's probably the reasoning behind that. I don't know that you necessarily need to. I think there's actually, I'm trying to remember, I know I've been told this at one point in time, but I think you can actually get the record with different routes. But there's one route that tends to be favored because it's pretty clearly going to be the quicker one. And that's starting in San Francisco and ending in New York and kind of going through the middle, versus some people started down in LA and kind of come through. But then I think you end up going through some really hot areas if you do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? I mean, if you want to do it, I guess in 2033 will be when I'm possibly eligible.
When your first opportunity?
Yeah.
We'll touch base.
We'll touch base in 2032, and we'll see what
do it together.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. I mean, it's I drove across the country. I, lived in Boston, went to college in California. I drove across the country, loved it. Been to 48 states, giving speeches, doing stuff. It's just great to go through the country.
Yeah.
To do it on foot would be a dream, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I always when I was teaching in the summer, I had a lot of flexibility. So that's probably when I should have done it, right?
Yeah.
When I was teaching. But I would always drive out to California in the summer, and it was I could fly out and then rent a car or something like that. But I always liked kind of doing that. You drive across, you stop a few times along the way, and you just kind of see a lot more that way.
And and you meet people and just get a intuitive feel of where things are. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm doing a race up in Des Moines end of October to just do just practice the fueling strategy I'm going to try to use at Desert Solstice. And I'm actually pretty fit, so I'm going to give it a good push too. But I'm also aware that I'm trying to 2x plus my fuel intake compared to what I've done in the past. So I'm this could go really badly.
Well, so how many calories are you going to be taking in an hour?
I want to get at least 80 grams of carbs per hour. That's kind of the low end of what I'm hoping to do.
So that's not David Roach gross.
No, yeah, he's way out there. He's at 150. So I'd have to I had David on after he did one Leadville, broke the record the first time.
Yeah.
So when I ran my fastest 100 mile, 11:19, I was averaging about 40 grams of carbs per hour. And he was like, I did 150. He's like, you literally had 4 times as much as I did.
Yeah.
And he's, man, you would have been so much faster. You would have broke 11 hours.
Maybe not. I mean, you also probably would have puked all over yourself,
Yeah.
right? No, I was, let's see, during Twisted Branch and during Tunnel Hill, I've probably taken in 75 grams of carbohydrates an hour. So
yeah,
300 calories.
I've been training my gut the last, I guess I'm probably 10 weeks in now, and I'm starting to feel pretty comfortable at 80. Like the first time I pushed up close to 80 after the run, because you're always extrapolating forward, so it's like a 2.5 hour run, and I'm like, could I do that 5 times?
Yeah,
you have to really start to ask yourself.
It's hard. And do you alternate different kinds of carbs so you don't get palate fatigue?
Yeah, a little bit. Although I'm going to try to do a lot of gels and liquids.
Yeah.
I think it's once you start getting up to the workload of 800 to 1,000 calories per hour, then it's really hard to justify solids, I think. And I think there's probably some space for it, but it's going to be a really small input.
Well, the nice thing, right, so Desert Solstice on a track can just get a bottle, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, logistically, that one is like rock solid for that. You make a mistake, you just correct it 400 meters later. So.
Right.
Yeah, I was originally going to do Canal Corridor because it just looked kind of a fun, fast, kind of more point-to-point style course. But then I decided to do, it's called the Equalizer Endurance Run up in Des Moines. It's just under 2-mile loop around this lake. The weather's almost always really nice.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's really controlled too. I can definitely make adjustments and kind of have a setup there that's a little more consistent and maybe a better spot to try this for the first time than Canal Corridor would have been. And then hopefully learn something and then apply it to Solstice. Or maybe I knock it out of the park and I don't have to do Solstice.
Right. Oh, it's a 100-miler you're doing, right?
Yeah, it's actually, they have, I think, a 6, a 12, and a 24. So I'm going to sign up for the 12 and try to see how far or try to get to 100 mile before then. And then if I feel, I have had one 100-miler that I did where I stopped at 100 miles and had time on the clock and didn't try to add to the 12-hour.
Yeah.
But the goal is always to stay out there if I can after the 100. And
well, you got to make sure. So, one lesson for you. I ran the Lake Warramog 50-miler, trying to set the American record, and it's a lake. But I was like, there were cars driving around, so you couldn't actually run the tangents.
Oh, geez.
And so I actually had the record when I went through 50 miles, but I was like 50.5 when I finished, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd missed it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, the tangents,
Yep, that's always the hard part about the track too, because the way I describe it is like if you're finding yourself doing an ultramarathon on a 400-meter track, you're doing it for speed or a PR or something to try to hit something where you want as fast of an environment as you could possibly expect. But these things aren't big enough where you're like, okay, it's just gonna be me and a couple people and we're gonna have like lane 1 the whole time. So there's like a 24, a 6-day, a 48-hour, and then different paces in there. So track protocol is always going around when you pass because there's really no great way to have someone move over, nor would it be fair for them because they've got their goals and things. It's not fair to say, okay, you got to move out to lane 2, 3 because this person's coming through. So like when I ran my fastest 100-miler or any of them on the track, it's like I'm probably running close to 101, maybe on a really packed track, 102 miles because you end up spending so much time in lanes 2 and 3 just kind of navigating the rest of the field. And I remember looking at that. I was like, well, what's the expectation for the average marathon? And I can't remember who told me it, but they said you should expect a 1% increase just from not being able to hit the tangents perfectly, or most of those courses are probably measured slightly long so they don't get slapped with a too short course scenario or something like that. But yeah.
That's the nice thing about Tunnel Hill. Like you get through and you're like 50.00. I actually went through it was like 49.96. And I was like, I hope someone doesn't think I cut a corner.
Hopefully
right?
this rounds up when I'm loaded on the Strava.
Oh, in fact, actually, at Tunnel Hill, I was like at 49.2, and I was like, oh my God, right? Like people are definitely going to think I cheated. And I realized my watch wasn't measuring during the tunnel.
Right. You got that little spot where the watch can time out for a little bit.
Yeah.
But that one is great too because you don't really have tangents. It's just straight running.
Straight running. You've got to go around a corner, you run straight back, and you don't have to go around anybody. And if you're in front, you're not lapping anybody either, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, if that was a paved course, that'd be the only way to make that
faster. That's the crushed gravel. Makes it a little bit slower.
I always found that one funny because you'd cross. There's like those maybe 2 or 3 spots where you actually do hit pavement, and you get that brief feeling of that would be a little.
It is faster. It's like a little bit it's totally a little bit faster that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So what's the goal for New York?
Well, it's the age group world championships, and so I'd like to do well. I could theoretically win it if I were to go as fast as I could 6 or 7 years ago, right? Like usually 50-year-old, the winner is around 2:30, but not particularly likely given my current trajectory. So maybe 2:35. We'll see.
Okay. Wow, so the 50 is usually 2:30 there.
Yeah.
They're scooting.
Yeah, they're good. I mean, based on my run with Brady this morning, I'd like to think I can get under 3:20. I was just cooked running 7-minute miles here in Austin.
The heat adjustment here is pretty wild, though.
He was like, you doing all right? I was like, I don't know. My heart rate is like kind of at like, my max is like 160. And Brady and I run a 7-minute mile pace around the lake, right? Just like jogging. But my heart rate was like 145, which is like really where it should be in like mile 22 of a marathon running 550 pace. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. It's the heat, it's fatigue, it's something.
Yeah. That lake loop too, I swear, I don't know what it is. And it's this weird mind trip because if you go anywhere off that lake in Austin, you're doing rolling hills.
Yeah.
So you hop on that lake loop and you get the least amount of elevation. So you think, okay, this is the fastest spot to run. But there's something about it. It just always feels like whatever the pace on my watch is 5 to 10 seconds slower than what it should be if I were like out on the roads.
Good. But though, when you and I ran it, we ran like 6:30, 6:40 pace, and I was totally great, right? So
a little better weather that time though. That was winter, wasn't it?
I think so. No, that was at South by Southwest, right? So that would have been right in March. I don't know. Based on how I ran this morning, like cracking 3 hours is going to be a miracle. But I don't know. Like 2:35 would be where I'd love to be.
Yeah,
we'll see. I want my kids to see me running fast, which is great. I want to do well in my age group. And the book comes out 5 days before. Ideally there'll be some people who care. And,
right. Talk about it for sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
They're like, who knows? When the book comes out, like maybe nobody will notice. But maybe it'll be like, maybe it'll hit. So.
Just a quick reminder that Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte source. I know that I lose 614 milligrams of electrolytes for every liter of sweat. So on those training sessions, especially the hot days, I'll make sure I have a packet of one of their multiple flavors in with my fluids. Or if I'm looking for a refreshing post-workout beverage or just staying on top of electrolytes throughout the day, I will often lean to their cans of Element Sparkle, which are a very tasty treat after a hot training run. If you want to get a free sample pack with your next purchase, head over to drinklmnt.com/HPO. What shoes are you going to wear?
Good question. I ran the last 50 miler. I ran the Puma Fast R3s.
For 50 miles?
Yep. And then
was that Tunnel Hill or?
That was for Lake Warmog. That was the lake in Connecticut.
Okay, see, I wouldn't have probably been out yet for Tunnel Hill last year because it would have been...
Tunnel Hill, I wore the Vaporflies, and then I ran a 50K race April before. Weirdly, I've only won 4 races since I was 18 years old in 32 years, and 2 of them were last April. So one was this 50K in New York, and I wore these like New Balance prototypes. They're probably out. I'm not sure what they are now. But those were amazing too. I actually did an experiment, which you and Brady would like, where I went to the track and I took 7 pairs of shoes and I attached a power meter and I ran, and a heart rate monitor, and I ran 640 miles in each of the shoes, and I alternated. So I ran them each twice. So it was like 14 miles of running at 640 pace. And then so one of them would be like mile 1 and mile 9 and 2 and 8 and 3 and 12. And then I averaged out the power and the heart rate to see what required the least effort to run 640 pace. And that was how I chose the R3s. And so I really should have done it on a road, not a track, to match the surface for Warmog. And so before my next race, either for the New York Marathon or if I do a track race or whatever, I should run on the same surface. But that's how I will choose my shoes for the next race.
Sure. Well, it's nice that you've gotten 50 miles in that shoe. That seems like that shoe. I love that shoe. It's fast, but it's also like a little wobbly. So I always wonder, I'm probably going to lean that direction for 100 miles, something like that at least. But yeah, you kind of get to that.
I don't know about on a track, like the cornering.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need to get on a track and do some long runs just to test it out, just to make sure that doesn't feel too awkward with that. But yeah, I mean, it's so fast though. Like I did when I was coming back from my Achilles injury, I was running in nothing but the New Balance 1080s for a while because that shoe with a little heel cup allowed me to run without
Those shoes
any
are
pain.
great. Those shoes are wonderful. Like they're such good trainers.
They are, yeah. But they're slow comparatively. So I remember when I first started getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start testing some of these premium foam shoes and just see how my Achilles responded. The way I did it was I'd finish like right around like a 10-mile run. And then I go and I switch into them and then run about a mile just to gauge, okay, what kind of fatigue am I getting, or is it going to flare up on me before I did a full run, and then find out later that day, oh shoot, I did too much.
Yeah.
And I remember I would do this run. It'd be like something like 650, low 650s in the New Balance 1080s. And I'd go and I'd throw on the fast R's, and I'd be like 15 seconds per mile, sometimes 20 seconds per mile faster. Just no additional effort, same heart rate.
Such a difference.
Yeah. So they pop. They definitely pop.
Yeah, I'm going to try the Vaporfly 4s. I always, the On Cloud Boom line has always been good for me, so I'll try those too. I'll see what New Balance has. I don't know.
It's hard now because like most of the brands have something that's at least competes.
Yeah.
And we were probably talking about 1 or 2 percentage points between the top in the sport, or a lot of the brands in the sport. And then it's just, I think at that point, it almost becomes which one feels best on your foot, or if you can go in and get lab testing done, which one actually shows the better percentage for you.
Or do what I did and go do 7 miles and test it out. Yeah, so I'll run that experiment and see what happens. I ran Twisted Branch in the Ultra Flies, which were great. I felt great, except for when I banged a root and lost a toenail. But that's the stuff that happens when you're out in the woods.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's cool. Awesome. Yeah. What else you got going on between now and then?
So between now and then, I'm going to run Rim to Rim in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, right on.
Yep. I'm going with a bunch of friends. We're going to do that in October. And then otherwise, I'm just going to try to... The fall is always busy when you're in like political media. Like stuff happens, right? Like readers kind of like quiet down, stories like the world kind of quiet. Not under Trump, like stuff is always exciting under Trump. Yeah. There's always stuff to write about. But, our subscriptions always go up in September, October. We have a big Atlantic Festival in the middle of September. I've got a pretty busy event schedule through the fall. So lots of travel, lots of cool places. I'm doing the New York Marathon, and then I'm going off to launch the book in Portugal. So I'm going off to Lisbon, which is going to be very exciting. Then I'm going off to California. I'm doing a bunch of events out in California. And then I'm going to Italy to do some events for the book. So there's going to be some good travel, some good running, some good experiences.
Yeah. Do you have a protocol that you use for training when you're traveling that much? Is there something that you find like works really well for you to maintain quality? Because I know like when I travel, it always feels like that first day, it's like there's everything's a little bit off. Are you doing anything that... When I travel to Europe, I work pretty hard to make sure my sleep. I'd go to bed an hour earlier each night for 3 nights before I leave. I usually take the red eye, and then I adjust pretty quickly. And so you just sort of assume that first day you're not going to be able to run that much. You get in a 4-mile recovery run. Sure. But then by the second day, you're in it. You're clicking. Right? Often I'm in like cool places with mountains, and so like it's even better. So sometimes I get in great training. Sometimes you can't do the speed stuff because you do have a little lethargy, or you're always there for work, so maybe you don't have time. But I tend to get it in because I'm always traveling. Like I've been to Europe, I don't know. I've been out of the country for events every month for 6 months. Like, there's always something. So you just learn to get it in. You probably normalize it almost at this point where it's just life. It's not even really an adjustment. I sometimes don't even know where I'm going to be during the week, right? I actually don't know where I'm going to be next week. Yeah. I think I'm mostly going to be in New York, but I also know I have a bunch of events. I'm pretty sure I have at least a day in Washington. And I might be going to California, right? But I'll get my mileage in and I'll get my running in no matter where I am. Yeah. Is it because it's subject to change, or is it just you don't want to know more than a certain time frame ahead? There's just so much moving parts. It's weird. It's like an event every day from now until the end of September. There's something somewhere that you're doing because you're selling ads, you're meeting with a client, you're going off, or now that I'm like talking about the book, you're going and you're doing more podcasts. So there's all this stuff, which is fun. It's fun to have this stuff. It does make it's a little complicated. But I guess the relevant point is that I just figure that I'm going to get my training in no matter where I am. And then I get it in. And sometimes you have to wake up at 3 or sometimes you have to run at 11. Right? Yeah. Makes it interesting for sure. Yeah. There are definitely times where I'm in Europe and I'm like running at midnight. Do you prefer to run by yourself then most of the time? Because I don't prefer it. I love running with friends. But the problem is it's just hard to schedule. Right. Yeah. And, you go to a new city and I always, every time I go to a new city, I'm going to find someone I admire on Strava, like with you, where I've been following you on Strava. This guy's awesome. Right? And so I'm in Austin. I'm like, hey man, you want to run? And you're like, yeah. And so I do that sometimes, but usually my schedule is so confused, I don't know exactly when I'm going to run. Right. Oh, wait, okay, but there's a break. It's hard to plan for that. Yeah. So I can't do it. I was just curious because you must have a lot of in-person types of interactions throughout the day and the week. So I always wonder when people prefer group runs or not. Because I know for me, if I have a lot of social interaction, I think I usually lean towards running by myself. All that I work from home, I could just not see anybody other than Nicole for days on end if I don't take some action.
Yeah.
So it's like I go to group runs because it's like, yeah, this is like really fun to be with people, and you need that. You can't just be a hermit and enjoy
It's
life.
funny. I like have no need to be alone.
Okay. So you're just extroverted?
I remember there was one period, I think I went 5 years without being alone in my house.
Really?
Right? Just was never alone in my house. Because I remember, you have 3 kids, right? So you're obviously not going to be alone that much.
Uh-huh.
But there was just never a moment where I was alone. Like when I was at home, my kids were there, my wife was there. When I was at work, like
Yeah.
I'm like almost, it is true that running may be the only time I'm alone, but I don't, maybe you've identified something, like there's a reason I do this.
Yeah.
Because it does give alone time, but it's not intentional. I would prefer to run with people always.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I would, but I don't train with a team. I don't train with a club just because the scheduling's too hard.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I think I'm probably just more. The way my biggest issue, I think, is I can tolerate being alone for long periods of time, but it's not good for me to keep doing that. So if I get into and then it's just this weird space to be in too, because I'm not really alone because I'm like always on calls or recording podcasts and stuff like that. So it's like this virtual connection, but then it's like you can go through 3 busy days of work where you're like, I talked to, engaged with a ton of people, but I was never actually with the person.
Uh-huh.
and then I find if I I can tolerate that, but then I notice like if I do that for too long, then I start losing motivation, it. Things aren't as exciting. And you're like, oh, this is kind of like depression maybe.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
And so then it's okay, when you have a lifestyle that allows you to do that if you want to, how do you frame it in a way where you're just giving yourself opportunities to not put yourself in that spot in the first place? So
yeah, that's a tricky balance. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you take it for granted because it's, most of my life I didn't have a choice. Like I had to go to school or I had to go to work, and you're just going to be put in front of people no matter you like it or not. And then you kind of, I think, you don't realize that the value of that all the time unless you kind of remove it to some degree.
Well, and that all happened with COVID, right? And it's so interesting where, my view very strongly is I'm in the office every single day. I'm in New York. I'm in the office as much as possible. I would work 5 days a week from the office if I'm not traveling. And there are a lot of people who don't believe that's better. They want their alone time. They want that. Yeah. I think the Atlantic would be a better company if everybody's in the office 5 days a week, but you make compromises and you figure it out, and you figure it out for different people, and you make agreements. But I think you work better, you learn more. It's better to be with people.
Yeah, I would agree. It's sort of one of those things where it's like the grass is maybe greener on the other side when you want that control and you want that flexibility, but then when you have it, you're like, okay, there needs to be some structure here too.
Right. And if you think about the things, I don't know, if I think about what I've learned in my life and what observing people and I was just, it's on my mind for a couple of different reasons, but I was thinking about what I learned from David Remnick at the New Yorker and just watching him as he, A, made the time to write his stories, B, as he circulated the office and picked up information from different people, C, as he would he'd come into your office and then you'd watch him come in and then you'd watch him leave, right? He was very good at both entrances and departures, right? And the efficiency of how he was able to kind of get through was an amazing thing to watch, and learning to model myself as best as possible after him, something I had to pick up by watching him, right? And by talking to him. And he taught me one lesson, that I think about a lot, that I read about a little bit in the book, where it was the Boston Marathon bombing and I was running the New Yorker's website. And I was insecure about my writing. Didn't think I was a good writer, didn't have confidence. And so the bombings happened. I was very confident in my ability to edit and to manage and to do all that stuff that, you need to do to run a website. Bombings happen, and he comes in, and he's like, okay, Nick, you're going to write about this. I was like, nah, it's good. I've got 2 stories coming in. I got a freelancer. I've got, He's like, no, you're going to write about this. You grew up in Boston and you're a runner, and this is the Boston Marathon, and bomb has gone off and you're going to write about it. I was like, I've got, Amy's got this thing and Michael's got, and he's like, Nick, stop. He's like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your phone down. I'm going to go out of this room. I'm going to close the door. And then in 1 hour, I'm going to open the door and you're going to hand me a draft of your story. And closes the door and leaves. I was like, okay, better get to work.
Better not get writer's block in that scenario.
No, and it's kind of a lesson that you take with you, and it applies to running. If you have a busy schedule and you have a lot of things to do and you have a limited time, what you should do right now is you should start, right? Just what you were saying about being efficient about your to-do list. And okay, I have an hour to write this story. right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start writing this story.
Yeah.
I'm not going to like mess around and check the Red Sox score. Whatever the distraction du jour is, I'm just going to focus and I'm going to do this. It's one of the lessons of running. Okay, I have 45 minutes today when I can run, right? I'm going to go use it right now, right? I'm just going to go out the door. I'm going to go. I'll be back in 44, right? And it's like a really good lesson in life.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So how long are you in Austin for?
About 2 more hours.
Okay, yeah, so I should probably wrap this thing up then so you can get to the airport.
No, I fly out tonight and go home, and I land in New York at midnight.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll
awesome.
see my kids. My little guy's got a soccer game tomorrow out in Smithtown, Long Island, so I'll be out there.
Right on. Well,
yeah.
Awesome, Nick. It was a pleasure to have you
So much
on.
fun, Zach. It's an honor to be on the show. You do a great show. It's awesome to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm just glad we were able to do it in person.
It's great. It's so much better. Like we were just talking.
Right, exactly.
So much
yeah.
better.
See,
so
you
much
helped
better.
me out.
Yeah, it's so much better. So.
Awesome, Nick. Take care.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.